This is a Black Sabbath cover. I'm fucking joking. It's a Drowning Pool song.
Welcome to the Riff Crew. I'm your host, Steve Mitchell, here for another big episode of the Electric Church here in the Riff Crew. And as always, joining me over in Washington, D.C., keeping himself out of trouble is Skull. How you doing, mate?
All right. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. In Cyberland, as you know, this is Skull broadcasting from the past, present, and future in the Chamber of the Cosmos. Here with my good friend Steve Oz. I'm in off again, on again, DC bomb rock band Black Manta. I've been in the DC scene for over 30 years and know people from all over the scene. As usual, really excited to be here. And also, once again, welcome back, my friends, to the Electric Church. This is about, you know, where we worship and the power of music, you know, as disciples of rock and roll and as members of the Brotherhood of Orpheus. That's why we're here, man, to make a proclamation for rock and roll. And well, a lot of people might not know this. You probably don't know, but we've had a few technical difficulties, so we're a little bit behind in our Electric Church shows. But this particular show is going to focus solely on the Maryland Death Fest. We've been wanting to put this up for a while, so I'm glad to finally get this sorted out. So this whole show will be dedicated to that. We have a lot to cover, a lot to talk about. And Steve Oz, as usual, if you have any questions or anything and you want to chime in, we can we can just chat about whatever. But
Well, we
I
won't
think
talk. I am interested in the news about the Georgia Guidestones. I'm not sure if you've been up to date with that, but maybe that's another episode. But
we could.
but MBF obviously has been a bit of an institution in the US, at least on the East Coast, and it's at least going on hiatus. So how was 2022?
Oh yeah, well, so you heard it's like there was rumor that that this might be the last one, or they might take an extended break. No one was really sure about that, and but the rumors were running rampant, and turns out when I was there, I actually did ask a few people. Turns out that it is true that, and that might be why there was so. I mean, the lineup is just absolutely stellar. Just mind blowing, and I probably talked about this previously. I mean, because I live outside of DC and it's in Baltimore, it's only 40 minutes away. I don't really have an excuse. It's like you have to go. I mean, we don't really have those kinds of festivals here over in the States, like over there in Europe and England and maybe even Australia. You guys are a little spoiled down there. I don't know if you have you have some pretty decent festivals down there, but we don't, when it comes to metal per se, we don't really have those kinds of festivals here, so you have to take advantage of them. So yeah, I mean, the lineup was just absolutely mind-blowing. 4 days. I don't normally get to go. There's only one year where I went to all 4 days. It's a bit, it doesn't matter how old you are, 4 days of music and all that is a bit brutal. I do stay in a hotel because it's just much easier. It's not that far away from the venue. And this time I had my friend, righteous friend, amazing rock and roll disciple and brother from another mother, Eric Johnson. He came up from Florida just because of the lineup was just so stellar. And he actually helped. He was my technical assistant. He took a couple of pictures. Well, I'm sure we'll be showing those throughout the episode here. But yeah, we stayed in the hotel. It was just a great time seeing him and spending time with him. And we go way back at the very beginning of the whole, the evolution of metal from like the early 80s up until the late 80s with like when things started to get more extreme, thrash and speed metal, it became death metal, became black metal, and etc. But so we were there at the ground level when all that was happening. So it's just great to be there with someone that experienced that at the ground level. It's always great to be with him.
And so many bands of that era as well were on the bill for MDF.
Yeah, it was a bit of there was, and there was a lot of Florida bands, oddly enough. And I think I mentioned previously that this is almost like was Tom Warrior's year. I kind of expected him to get on stage and maybe guest a song with someone. He didn't do that. I kind of suspected he would, but he didn't. But obviously Tryptikon, we'll get into that, and then fucking Hellhammer, we'll get into that. Just a colossal, just mind-blowing experience. No one ever thought it would happen. Warrior is he's very,
eccentric,
moody, eccentric.
Yeah.
And, he gets into these certain moods, and 10 years ago, if you would have asked him, he'd have been like, I'm never doing Hellhammer ever, blah, blah, blah. Or 20 years ago or whatever, but he has since changed his mind. Thank the metal lords above that he has, because we'll get into that. But there was just a lot of old school bands. It's great to see these old school guys still doing it. And if you have the opportunity to see them, you obviously you have to. I've mentioned it before. We always do the Edison lot. The previous Maryland Death Fest had one way back in the beginning. There was a place called the Thunderdome, and that was itself was outside of Baltimore, about 10 or 15 minutes outside of Baltimore. It was there for a few years. It was strictly death metal. It was only like 1 or 2 days. And I skipped it for a while up until around 2010, or just whatever, life happens or whatever. But also it was like when we went, we really were there to see Repulsion, really wanted to see them, and that was incredible. But to be quite honest, a full day of death metal, after a while, it's overwhelming. To me, it's just like, it's like a bit overkill. You know what I mean? So around 2010, 2011, they started incorporating different genres, which is a genius. You get these old school thrash bands and doom bands, and even a couple of hard rock bands here and there. And then legendary bands like Venom, just incredible legendary bands like Venom, who basically were the blueprint for what became extreme metal later on. So, so they really started to mix it up. But later on, around that time, that's when they had it at the Sonar in Baltimore, which was one location. They closed off the roads outside, and then there was like a stage A, a stage B, and then even 1 year or 2 years, there was a stage C. But so the music was always rotating, and for whatever reason that closed, and then they had to retool it. And so what happened was you have these different clubs that you have to go to, and they have to buy a 4-day ticket. And then the Edison lot, I became a denizen of the Edison lot. You're outside, you have that outside vibe. That I was talking about before, is like a lot of these metal fests over in Europe, they have that outside vibe. We don't really get that. And so to me, the Edison lot is really, and that's where most of the bigger bands play anyway. You don't have to go anywhere. You don't have to fuck around. All the food, all the beer, all the merch, everything is right there. They have 2 stages that they're constantly rotating, and that's very cool. One's done, another one starts up. And so this year, me and Eric just did the Edison lot. The Edison lot, they actually got rid of for several years. And I don't know, maybe the city of Baltimore begged them. They said, okay, if you guys want to do this, we'll give you the Edison lot because we want money, or who knows, you know what I mean? We want tourist money. But they brought the Edison lot back. It was genius. It was really busy. There were a lot of people there. I can't imagine, maybe if they did take a break, I can't imagine that they wouldn't do this. I mean, these guys have to be making money hand over fist. All of the merch was sold out. They had to make a repress of the shirts, stickers, blah, 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 coffee mugs, underwear, diapers,
So
whatever.
They did the whole Kiss last ever, and then just sold a bunch of merch. And so next time they'll come out, they'll do the last ever, a bunch of merch.
Yeah, hey, that's how you do it, man. Ozzy, No More Tours tour, part 2, part 3, part 4.
Exactly.
He's been on the No More Tours tour for the past 30 years. But yeah, the merch totally sold out. They had to make repress a bunch of the shirts and everything. But when we first got there, there was a band that I wanted to see called Graveyard, and I thought because they do have, some of the years they have a lot of doom bands. This year they didn't have a whole lot of doom bands, and I thought it was the Graveyard from Sweden. Turns out it was some death metal band, Graveyard. So that wasn't the same band that I was hoping to see. But we got there in the Friday afternoon around 4ish, and the line was long as shit. It took us a while to get in. But while we were waiting to get in, we heard bands like Atheist, which is, late 80s, Florida technical thrash. A lot of people are into. So that was cool hearing that. And let's see. There was also Suffocation. Those guys always deliver. But then right around that time, there was rumor that there was going to be a thunderstorm. And so they decided at the last minute, wisely, that they had to move this. And I didn't even mention the power plant, all these different locations that they split up. the Edison lot, the Rams Head, the Baltimore Soundstage. The Rams Head and Baltimore Soundstage are literally like within spitting distance of each other. And the power plant is not even a club. The power plant is just an
old
section.
power plant.
Yeah, which is right. They tried design this specific part of Baltimore like a European beer garden. And so the Rams Head is here and the soundstage is here. And then there's these other clubs and everything. And there's like this massive awning in between these clubs and these restaurants and these bars. And the power plant was the area that where a lot people that have been to the Death Festival know what I'm talking about. But there's this one section where all of the merch guys sell their merch. This year there was no merch at that area. Most of the merch was at the Edison lot, but so that was the power plant, and they had bands there. And so they wisely decided to move. I would have loved to see Carcass outside. I've never seen them in that outside with that outside vibe. I personally love seeing music outside because of the sound is different. The sound carries different. It has, to me, a warmer, more organic sound. But they wisely had moved it to the power plant area. So we actually got to see a band we weren't going to be able to see because you had to buy power plant tickets too. You had to buy Rams Head tickets, Baltimore Soundstage tickets, power plant tickets, and Edison lot tickets. And or you could buy a 4-day, all-day, everything pass, which means if you want it, you at the Edison lot, then you have to scramble, which is like it's like 5-10 minutes away. Anyway, to me, that shit's a fucking nightmare. You hang out at the Edison lot, see all the bands you want to see, you party there. You don't have to fuck around with it.
We're gonna try and ramp things up a bit for this one. If you know the album order, we're just doing it start to finish, so you know what this one is. Well, this one is called Fuel for the Fire!
anyway, we got to see Obituary at the power plant, and they were great. And you can just imagine, we might have discussed this before, like what song they played. Can you imagine? Because there's one song that they always have to play, right?
Circle of the Tyrants.
There you go. That, I thought it would be neat if, like, let's say Tom just showed up out of nowhere and jumped on stage with some of these younger cats that were influenced by him. But yeah, he didn't. But they did play that. You knew they were going to play it. So that was cool. And they played Slowly We Rot. I hadn't seen them since. I thought I had seen them previously, but it had been a while, and I don't think I had seen them since like World's Demise, since like '94. But they were great. Trevor Perez has that incredible Celtic Frost guitar sound, so that was fantastic. And then after that, Violence played. They were good. I think they were on tour. The vocalist's voice was completely shot, unfortunately, but he soldiered through, so it's good for him. He just powered through it. And then after that was Carcass, and I've seen them a few times. I saw them during the Heartwork tour. You guys might recognize this. So they played a bunch off of Heartwork. That was really amazing. They played some off Necroticism, of course. Always they have to pepper in a couple of new songs. But we've talked about this before. One of my favorite albums from Carcass. It took me a long time to get into, and I know that you're into this subgenre, rock and roll, death and roll, whatever they call it. It took me a long time to get into this album. But this album is absolutely crushing. The guitar sound is just mind-blowing. To me, it's like it's hypnotic. I can't get enough of this album and the guitar sound. And they played Keep On. They started off with Black Star, like the very beginning, and then they went into Keep On Rotting in the Free World, and so that was cool. There were some weird frequencies there, unfortunately, that were kind of bugging me a little bit. But that was really awesome. I mean, of course, just seeing them, it's always great to see Carcass. And so that was the end of the night. Another thing I didn't mention is, like, these nights, if you're not going to Ram's Head or the Baltimore Soundstage, these shows end rather early. Like the Edison was like 10:30, 11 o'clock, gives you plenty of time to go back to the hotel room and party or whatever you want to do, which is what we did. So that was that. Me and Eric went back, hung out the next day, and we came back, and I guess Hello was we saw him Friday night, and we were hanging out. He was kind of jumping back and forth because he had one of those 4-day passes, and Saturday was really a really exciting day because there was a lot heavy hitters. Obviously, you're talking about Obituary and Carcass the first day, but on the second day you're looking at, I mean, we didn't show up until around 4 o'clock, but you're looking at, Cancer, Autopsy, Tryptikon, Onslaught, Coroner, the Cavalera brothers. I mean, one amazing band after the other. And Cancer I'd never seen before. I love seeing these old school thrash metal bands, of course, and they were a little bit what I always consider a little on the late side, like 90 or 91 for thrashes. To me, was when it was kind of winding down and death was starting to take over, and then black metal. But they were kind of death thrash, and they were good. I think the main guy, the singer guitar player, was playing this White Flying V, and he had a great tone. He had one of the best guitar tones out of the entire festival, as far as I'm concerned. and so they sounded great. And then after that, it was Coroner, and they were fantastic. Once again, there's that tie-in with Warrior. These I don't know if you know it or not, but Coroner were the yeah, you're shaking your head.
Yeah,
So
they
you
were
know.
roadies or techs.
Yeah, they were the Frost Roadies back in the day, and then they wanted to start their own band. In fact, they even did there's a demo that they did with Warrior called the Death Cult demo. It's essentially a Lost Frost. It's Technical Frost album, and I would call it a Lost Frost album because he's singing on it. It's a really fantastic album, and it does. I think it cuts in at about 30 minutes or so it counts as a full album. And for a demo, the production is really good. So I half expected him to get on stage and play. He didn't. But it was great seeing them. I saw them about 10 years ago at the Maryland Death Fest, and they were fantastic. And after that, it was, I even forgot to mention the very first band that we wanted to see there was Onslaught, and UK thrash band. They were one of these first bands that came out kind of around the same time as Slayer that were doing this hyper thrash or speed metal. There's these different schools of thought about thrash and speed metal. Speed metal is faster than thrash and all this stuff. Like speed metal is almost like a subgenre of thrash metal. But Onslaught was one of the first bands that were doing that kind of like hyper thrash sound. And they were fantastic. It's always great to see these old guys. And oddly enough, there was a guy got on stage after the set, and I was like, hey, I think I recognize that guy. And it was the guy from the Heavy Metal Hall of Fame, the Pat Gazzaldo guy that we contacted and said offered us to go. That's another show that the viewers can go look at if they want to. What another, I think our very first Electric Church. But he was talking about how Onslaught is going to be a new member entry into the Heavy Metal Hall of Fame. So it was just really cool. I was like, hey man, I know that guy. So that was cool. But Onslaught were fantastic. It was just a great lineup. So, you know, you had Onslaught and then Cancer and then Coroner. Autopsy were cool. I think we took a break when Autopsy played and started looking at some merch and stuff. That's when we realized like everything was sold out. And then the Cavalera brothers, they are doing this thing called Return Beneath the Arise or something like that, where they're playing the Beneath the Remains and Arise in its entirety, but they didn't have enough time to do that for the set, so they left a couple tracks off, but it was incredible. They were super tight. My Eric said that's like his pick of the weekend. I think it was tied with Hellhammer, but we'll get to that later because that was the Sunday. But that was his pick of the entire weekend, and that was just amazing seeing them. Max is still on top of his game. His voice sounded incredible. Igor sounded amazing on the drums. One song after another, just giving the crowd what they want, you know, playing, you know, everything off of those two albums. It was incredible. And then, of course, the band that capped off the night was Tryptikon. And, you know, the thing about them is you always expect them to play, you know, maybe a couple of Celtic Frost songs, but
the hits, the top of the pops.
Yeah,
at least for
you know,
Celtic Frost.
And I've seen them before at Maryland Death Fest about 10 years ago, and they were amazing. And they always played a couple of Frost songs, but they played several this time, and I couldn't believe it. There had been rumors that along with, Triumph of Death, his Hellhammer cover band, that he had been doing unscheduled, Celtic Frost sets, full for when Tryptikon plays, he would do like unscheduled full Celtic Frost sets, which is mind-blowing. I mean, it's his music, he can do what he wants. But of course, a lot of the fans, they were excited to, he did play some Tryptikon stuff, but he played the first song they played was Procreation of the Wicked. They always slow that down, but it still sounded fantastic. And then they played a Tryptikon song, and then they played, you want to guess what song they played after that?
Circle of Torrents.
Very good.
Yeah, there we go.
They played. They were like, well, we don't give everyone can play, but we're gonna fucking play our own version of it. And that, it turns out, Procreation of the Wicked is one of the songs that they like to slow down and doom up. But they don't do that with any of the other songs, which is cool. I mean, maybe if they do, maybe just a tiny bit. So that sounded fantastic. And then they did another Tryptikon song, and then they did a song called a Celtic Frost song. I was completely blown away. This song is called Mesmerized. It's off of the Into the Pandemonium. It's their more what considered experimental album. After that one came out in like 87 or 88. And it's always been considered their more experimental one. To Megatherion, you have Morbid Tales, To Megatherion, and Into the Pandemonium, and they're one of these bands that were constantly evolving, constantly experimenting. So there's some controversial stuff on that album, but there are 3 or 4 songs that you would consider like classic Frost style songs, and Mesmerize is one of them. And I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe that they played that. It was very cool. And then after that, they played Dethroned Emperor, and that was incredible. And then they ended it with a Tryptikon song, but they played 4 Frost songs. So that was, I did get to see them in 06 for the Monotheist tour here in the States at that legendary club that I've mentioned before called Jack's. And by the way, I want to say Jack's is 2 X's, not CKS. I've mentioned Jack several times throughout, in the show, and people probably are thinking, oh, Jack's like a Jack, like somebody's name is Jack. No, it's JAXX for whatever fucking reason. Anyway,
that's the decline of the school system for you there.
Exactly. But I did see them as Celtic Frost, and I've seen Tryptikon now, but it was cool that Tryptikon is playing, their fair share of Frost songs. And so after that, that was the end of the night for me and Eric. Like I said, 10:30, 11 o'clock, that's it. You drive back to your hotel, it's about 20 minutes away, hang out, party, listen to music, whatever. Do whatever you want. And so we just hung out. And then the next day, I wanted to say we just, you start all over again, but we started to realize that a lot of this merch was going to disappear, not be around. And so we decided to, I was like, I kept asking everyone, I was like, are there going to be Hellhammer shirts? Nobody knows. Nobody knew anything. It's like the Wild West. You just show up. And I was like, okay, well, I was like, Eric, we have to get there early because this shit is selling out. I did buy one shirt. You probably will post it here for the show, but I bought a Carcass shirt, and those went like that. They were like, if I hadn't gotten in line, that would have been it. They would have been gone. So I was like, all right, man, we have to get there early meaning 2:00 in the afternoon. And, we get there, we rush up, and I'm like, all right, I want to get a Hellhammer shirt. And they're like, there aren't any Hellhammer shirts. I'm like, what? And they're like, well, go ask that guy. So I go ask that, again, getting bounced around. Turns out, no Hellhammer shirts, no Triumph of Death shirts. We saw people wearing them, and apparently the people that we saw wearing them, people come from all over the world for this festival. So there were some people from Europe wearing the shirt because they actually had seen them over in Germany or wherever, one of these, Bloodstock or Walk-In or Hellfest or whatever.
Were they legit T-shirts or were they bootlegs?
They were legit, yeah. So they have shirts. They either sold out of them and didn't have enough time to make more, or I have no idea. I really don't know. So, but they were just, they didn't have any. And when we got there early, so there was a bunch of bands that we didn't really expect to see. Some of them were actually pretty good, like this band called, what were they called? Necrofire. There was just a bunch of bands I didn't really expect to see that actually turned out to be pretty decent bands. But my friend Demon Dave, Dave Dag, he's a legendary metal DJ from WIRU, University of Rhode Island, 90.3, where I was a DJ for a split second. He had come to several of these. His favorite band is, I just have to give a shout out to him because one of his favorite bands is Nunslaughter. He didn't get to come this time, which is a drag. But you know, he was there in spirit. But that was one of the bands that played on Sunday. And obviously for us, we were there. I was there. The main draw for me for the entire festival obviously is Triumph of Death, Hellhammer. I mean, historically, just, you know, we can go all the way back to Venom, you know, but this is Venom and Bathory and Celtic Hellhammer / Celtic Frost, which is essentially the same band. Those bands right there are basically the godfathers of extreme metal, the blueprint for it. Or, you know, and in recent years, people have been saying, you know, the first wave of black metal or whatever I don't use those terms because I actually grew up with it. So black metal to me is not black metal until the early 90s. But you could call it proto black metal or whatever. And, you know, even though Venom has an album called Black Metal, it's more of, you know, new wave of British heavy metal or proto thrash or whatever you want to call it. But I mean, that alone, if I was single and I had the money and I lived in California and I was, you know, was into all the music that I'm into now, and I heard that they were coming, I'd be there in a heartbeat. That would be the main draw for me. So it was, and to have an old school band like Destruction play on the same day as Hellhammer, that was incredible. So I mean, you know, between Destruction, Hellhammer, and then Deicide, and Deicide played Legion in its entirety. There was, and then there was Nocturnus AD, which is another one of these Florida death metal bands. There seemed to be a lot of Florida death metal bands that weekend, and so you know, I'm a native Floridian, so it's just cool to. And we'll get into that one day, but it was just cool to have all of those bands there. And Immolation, I know some people are really into them, and Hypocrisy, a lot of people are really into that band as well. Peter Tactrin, I'm sure I'm sure all these guys were hanging out. Peter Tactrin, I'm pretty sure, I mean, he produced Destruction albums. He was like the wonderkind even before Andy Sneap, who started doing all these metal bands like in the mid to late O's. Even before that, Peter Tactrin was the wonderkind, you know, working with like these, you know, legendary bands at the time like Destruction, and also pretty sure helped produce or worked on the Monotheist, Celtic Frost Monotheist. So I'm sure all these guys were hanging out, chilling out, talking to Tom Warrior and all this stuff. But Destruction was fantastic. I've seen them many times. I've seen them going all the way back to '89. You know, I saw them for the Live Without Sense tour. So I fucking loved them. They were incredible. This is one of my favorite albums right here, Released from Agony. It's fucking incredible. And of course, this is one of my favorite Destruction albums. This is actually one of my favorite thrash albums of all time, right here, Infernal Overkill. This absolute masterpiece from beginning to end. And you know, they're one of these bands that are constantly producing, constantly making new albums. I get it, that's cool. So they're always gonna have to play a couple of new songs, but they did play a bunch of old stuff. Curse the Gods, Mad Butcher, Life Without Sense, and they played Release from Agony, which was fucking awesome. I did not expect them to play anything off that album, so I was super, super excited about that. And then, of course, they ended with Bestial Invasion, and there were a few other newer songs thrown in there. But there was one song that I was like, holy fuck, I know that song. I know this entire album by heart, but I couldn't think of the name of the song title. And so I had to go back and look, and it's like, they played there. I expected them to play Invincible Force or Bestial Invasion or Thrash Attack. Thrash Attack is like a 3-minute instrumental, amazing song. And of course, they did not play Invincible Force or Thrash Attack, but they did play a song called Death Trap, which is, that would be considered a little a deep cut, if you will. So that was pretty wild that they played that. That was fucking amazing. They delivered. They sounded fantastic. But after that, I'm just actually going to leave the best for last, and I'll just talk about Hypocrisy was cool. They have that weird alien thing going on. The whole conspiracy and that whole alien and conspiracy angle. They were good. They were cool. It's just great to see, bands that you've never seen before. In the same, I saw Deicide 94 Once Upon the Cross. There's a famous club in Providence called Club Babyhead, where all of these metal bands were playing, underground bands, and that was an amazing little club. And I think I saw them in 94 for the Once Upon the Cross tour, and that was great. But they played Legion in its entirety, and that was really cool. Everybody was getting off on that. Glenn was used his typical humorless satanic self. He didn't really talk a whole lot to the crowd, or he just went up and did his thing. He sounded great. His voice sounded great. The band sounded great. But after that, obviously, like I said, for Eric, he said, for him, it was the Cavalera brothers, obviously all these other bands too, but I guess, pound for pound, that was like his pick for the weekend. And for me, it's this band right here, Hellhammer, Apocalyptic Raids. The set, man, it's fucking legendary. Demon Entrails, triple album, triple fucking album, Demon Entrails. It was incredible, man. Like I said, for me, that was the main draw. Everything else was just icing on the cake. In the set, his sound, it was completely pulverizing. When you're a live band, and you're at the mercy sometimes of the sound man, or something happens to your gear and you have to borrow someone else's gear, or you have to use their backdrop, or you have to use their lineup and whatever. When it came to Hellhammer, Warrior was not fucking around, dude. It obviously was his, I think it was a couple of the guys from Tryptikon, but not all of them. One of the guitar player was strictly there just for Hellhammer. I have to tell you, his guitar sound was fucking incredible. It was right off the records. The guitar, it had that fuzzy underworld, macabre, gothic soup of I don't know what, a miasmic sound of whatever, demons being unleashed. I don't know what the fuck you want to call it. Holocaust X Vox, you know, that's what he is here. That's what it was. You had VX, Holocaust, and Dam Buster vocals. That's what you heard, man. VX, Holocaust. That was his fucking guitar sound. Was like listening to fucking the Apocalypse, man. It was fucking incredible. It was completely legit. And it was euphoric. The entire set was euphoric. I mean, he basically played everything off of Apocalyptic Raids, and then for the longest time, these demos have been notoriously bootlegs. They went in the studio and they were made for their fan club. And so they were like very limited release, and then they officially released this several years back. But he played Third of the Storms, Massacra, Maniac, and a couple of other songs off of the Demon Entrails, and then Horus the Aggressor off this one, Messiah. And there was another mind blower. He was like, so there's this song, one of the very first Celtic Frost songs that we played that was released as a Celtic Frost song was actually not a Celtic Frost song. It was actually a Hellhammer song. Me and Martin wrote this back in 1984. It was one of the very last Hellhammer songs we ever wrote. And I was like, holy fuck, what the hell is he talking about? And he's like, this song ended up on Morbid Tales, and this song is called Visions of Mortality. And I was like, holy fuck. So he played another Celtic Frost song in the Hellhammer set. And I was like, I was, you know, it was incredible. He was having the time of, I gotta tell you, man, for someone, you know, my nickname for him, you know, my nickname for him, for Tom, I call him Weeping Tom, because he's always weeping. He's always sad. Tom's always sad. But for someone that is always sad and always seems to be depressed and down and, you know, are you morbid? It always seems to be morbid or whatever. He was having the time of his life. He was smiling. People were like, you could hear people shouting, you're awesome. He was like, I can't do this shit anymore. I'm getting too old and blah, blah, blah. And they're like, no, you're awesome. And he's like, oh, thank you. Very humble, super fucking cool guy, super down to earth, having a great time. And so he really was just enjoying himself. He was very humbled by the audience's, response. And of course, I have to say that the very last song they played, can you guess what it was? Do you know Hellhammer? Do you know this album?
I don't know the material that well.
Apocalyptic Raids. Well, there's a song on here. There's a legendary song on here called, the name of the band is called Triumph of Death. That's the name of the song off the first EP, off the Hellhammer EP, and it's almost 10 minutes long, and it's basically him like of him basically dying. You know, it's a song about someone being, if someone were to record you dying or from, you know, the Black Plague or something, that's what you would sound like. And so that was the last song they played. It was fucking amazing. Honestly, that Deicide played after that. Honestly, I could have left. No offense, Glenn, but you know, you don't care anyway because you're a Satanist and you don't give a shit. But I could have. Deicide was okay. It was cool seeing them again, but that was it. I have a bunch of Eric took a bunch of photos. I'm sure they'll be posted up here. I don't ever have to go to another Maryland Death Fest ever again. Honestly, after seeing Hellhammer, I mean, Obituary and Carcass and Onslaught and the Cavalera brothers and Destruction and Tryptikon, and, Coroner, it was it Hellhammer, just completely mind blowing, just completely mind blowing. And of course, I will go the next time it comes, but man, this one is going to be hard to beat. I have seen some incredible ones. I actually have all of the catalogs. There was a couple of years where they weren't being cheap about it, and they were giving away these little programs. They did it like 2 or 3 years in a row, which is a very cool thing of them to do. I collected those. I have, just to have a little souvenir. You look, oh, I remember that shit. All the bands in there, a little photo of them, a little description of the band. Also, my friend Dave Demon Dave, he was a manager at a FedEx for a Kinko's for a really long time. And when he would come, he would make these fucking elaborate, amazing like booklets. So I have all these incredible booklets from these the previous death festivals. I've seen Venom there, and I've seen Sleep, and I've seen Winter, and I've seen Paradise Lost, and I've seen Candlemass, and the list goes on and on and on. I've seen Satan and Pentagram. I've seen Chile Pentagram, and I've seen US Pentagram. I've seen Pagan Altar. I've seen Manila Road. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. I've seen Voivod. But this year is going to be hard to beat. Maryland Death Fest 18, even though it's been 20 years, they decided to keep it Maryland Death Fest 18. Is going to be a hard one to beat, honestly, my friend. And I think that's it. I mean, we had an amazing time, Eric. Metal Brothers from a long time ago. Eric Hello was kind of been popping in and out doing his own thing, and he came and hung out at the hotel room one night, and we hung out and chilled and just talked about old times and the shows and all that stuff. But like I said, man, I think that one's going to be hard to beat. You got any questions, any insight, anything you want to add?
No.
Are there any bands that I mentioned that you would have really wanted to see? Or now that I'm talking about them, do you feel like you would be like, wow, that sounds like a band that you would have wanted to go out of your way to see?
I think to see Tryptikon, that would probably be, because some of those bands I've seen, some of them are probably not my thing. But I think it's the overall experience of just getting all of that. You get a taste of so many different bands in just a handful of days.
So Tryptikon and Hellhammer?
Maybe not on the same night.
Well, one was on Saturday and one was on Sunday. Right?
Yeah, I wouldn't say no to it. But I can't see any promoter putting on a metal festival like that with that type of billing in Australia. So you definitely have to head to MDF or to Europe to get something like that.
Yeah, you'll have to come over sometime, man. You stayed at the in the chamber before, in the Temple of the Fisher King.
Yeah, I survived it. I don't know if I'll share another hotel room with you though.
Yeah, man. And the place we stay at, it's not that far away from the festival. And I would say if you were here for this last one, I would have insisted you go to see Hellhammer, of course. And I would have insisted that you enjoy it, and you would have enjoyed yourself, and it would have been rapturous, and it would have been life altering. It would have changed your life forever. But that's it for me, man. It was an amazing time. If they skip a year and just to regroup or whatever, I get it. But I've been going to them every year for over 10 years now. So I've had to skip a few here and there, but I've been going solid for like about 10 years. So the next time they have one, maybe you'll have to come.
You sound like someone who's given up the booze. I've been going solid for about 10 years.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, I think that might be it for this, man, unless you have any other questions.
No, it was just good to hear the experience of the weekend.
All right, well then I'll end it by saying, always remember to worship the electric church, ladies and gentlemen, and also remember to look to the stars, carry that torch of enlightenment, and strive to be a disciple of rock and roll and the Brotherhood of Orpheus.